Hi, guys. Welcome to another episode of Happy Being Well. I have an exciting guest today, and me and her totally speak the same language. So I'm super, uber duper excited to get this podcast rolling. We have Leni Rivera, who is the owner of Workplace Experience Consulting. And we are going to talk about, how love really is missing in corporate and, in American corporate culture. And most Americans are working in corporations. I was once one of them myself, so I can totally speak to my experience on how, this predominant culture of bullying is very prevalent in corporate America, and how basically their behavior is being rewarded and they're the ones end up thriving in in those types of organizations. And how that translates into our greater culture, because after our personalities, your behavior gets molded. Let's face it, we are working more than spending time with our families or friends. I mean, most of our lives are spent in the workplace, and even the 8-hour day is not even 8-hour day anymore. It's like it's like a myth now. It's actually longer due to technology and cell phones and laptops, um, and keeping up with the ever demanding workload, where people are now taking their work home just to keep up and meet their deadlines. So before we dive deep into this very, very much needed topic, this podcast is sponsored by happybeingwell.com, your online store for creative on yoga leggings, crystals, natural soaps, natural candles, natural deodorants, and 100% natural facial masks, and much more self-care goodies at happybeingwell.com. And anybody who purchases any self-care products from this podcast, you can use code podcast25 for 25% off any products. So let's go back to Leni. I always want to say Lena.
Yeah, you did it right.
So this is what you do. Like, this is awesome. Like, this is like you create positive workplace environments. And I totally agree. And, because one thing is, most people, like, everyone's motivated differently. So I always thought, most of the corporations adopt this like fear-based motivation, is probably because they think that most people, once they are fear of losing their jobs, they're gonna start working harder, right? To not lose that job, right? So whereas for me, I'm not motivated, out of a fear. I'm more toward motivation. So I work hard because I enjoy the journey of, strengthening my skill sets and seeing what I can create and achieve. And then of course it's the end result of success, and that feels good. And so, you know, so how do you mitigate between, people's, unless people, just the people that are motivated by fear, maybe they just transmute into being motivated, through um just simple achievement. And you discussed too earlier that you're seeing a change, due to the pandemic. So just talk to us about, yeah, like, why is corporate America, like, why are the bullies still prevailing after, it's been how many years since the industrial, revolution? It's been like, what, since the 50s? And we're
Yeah, even
still,
before that, 1800s. Yeah, exactly.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Well, I think, we ended up graduating to factories, I think, in the 50s. And then there was the person that he totally molded the manufacturing process, and that was Taylor. I forget his first name, but it was Taylorism. And he was observing workers, and he was literally like observing how much they took time to finish each task. He literally was watching them 24/7, their breaks, everything. Um, and he was the, literally the godfather of this attitude of, like workers, they're kind of like their natural habitat is like laziness, and they need to be, um, given a very rigid structure, or else they won't produce a lot of labor. And so therefore he was strategically clocking how long everything took on average, clocking everybody's time. I don't know how long it took to screw in a bolt or something like that, take something off the conveyor belt or whatever. And then he literally set in those mechanisms, in terms of structuring the workforce, in terms of time and stuff like that. So he made it very mechanical, uh, in terms of the, work, how humans work in a workplace in that time. So, and then it kind of grew from there. But yeah, Taylorism was the kind of the godfather of, I would say, HR.
Well, yeah, the thing, there has been a lot of change in workplaces through history and in different places, in different times, in different environments all over the world. And what you're talking about specifically, that really happened during the time where manufacturing became such a big thing, and the conveyor belt system, and the assembly line, and even like Toyota, for example, in Japan came up with a book, and they became established in the industry for being very creating a productive conveyor belt assembly line system that was effective, right? And there are Sigma belts that are aligned with that idea of making sure everything is efficient, everything goes in a row. McDonald's is another example of an efficiency. And while I don't mean to bog that down, because there is a place for that, being efficient and timing everything down to the second to make sure that everything happens according to, make sure that productivity happens at a certain timeline. There is a place for that, but it is not for everything, for sure. And there is no place for that in the creative industry, in corporate America industry, in retail, maybe in advertising. It's not the same, and it shouldn't be the same. And to copy paste that kind of ideology, I guess, or workplace ideology in all different workplaces is not correct.
Do you, in your experience, do you think, advertising agencies, any other type of agency that, any corporation that has a, working in marketing or whatever it is, you have to infuse that creative element. Do you think that there's now like elements of this Taylorism adopted in corporations?
No, I'm not saying that it's not adopted. I'm saying that it shouldn't be, because you're right. And, I'm in the workplace experience industry, and I am surprised by a lot of tools and technology that are in the corporate world now, whose main purpose is to measure people's productivity, which really the only reason why a technology a tool or a leader would want to know your productivity, and based on how much time do you put into your work, and how the time that you put into what is the output of your productivity, and to measure that. The only reason they'd want to know that is because they're putting numbers to you. They're attaching an ROI to you. How much are you bringing to the business in terms of ROI, in terms of numbers, in terms of profit? And that's where I'm saying it's broken. That's why I'm saying it's broken. And your question earlier about how organizations are so toxic now. There was a Gallup poll that was released before the pandemic that everybody in the workplace industry had referred to, because it said that 70% of America's workers are unhappy with their jobs, severely disengaged and unhappy with their jobs. 70%. That's huge. That means that 70% of people are not happy. Okay, that is today not surprising anymore, because that is reflected in the Great Resignation. People have, we spoke earlier about how, one of the one of the silver linings of the pandemic, and I don't mean to undermine the difficulty and the tremendous challenge that the pandemic has had on most of us, many of us, all of us. But the silver lining is because, sorry, it's my cat, because we were forced to work from home and stay at home and shelter in place, we were forced to take time to pause and be with the people that we love. All of a sudden people are losing each other. People are losing family members, losing friends to this COVID, virus. And we now take stock. We understand what's important to us, what's valuable to us, that life is fleeting. And so we've come to connect with our purpose, with what is valuable to us, the people and things that we value, that add value into our lives. So when there was it's not a coincidence that very early this year, when companies started talking about returning to the office, very shortly after that is when the Great Resignation began and has continued since. And the reason for that is because all of a sudden people are now face to face with the things that do not align with their value system. I can no longer work with managers who do not value me. I work so hard, I work so well, and this is how much you pay me, this is how much I'm being treated. And like what you were saying, when there's a culture of fear where it's toxic and people are trying to just throw each other under the bus to gain momentum and climb the ladder, it's a toxic, horrible environment that once you're connected with your purpose and with your humanity, you realize how wrong it is. And you don't want to be a part of that anymore. And so that's what the pandemic has really gifted, I like to say gifted workers with, is that knowledge and that empowerment to know, what, I'm not going to take this anymore. I don't want this. I'm not going to take this. And that's why working from home is so valuable to people. And it's not going anywhere. And it's also why the people who were the leaders, who are, like what you were saying, narcissistic or sociopaths, psychopaths, these people, they're now the ones who are wanting to gain back control, have everybody back to the office because they've lost control. When you talk about being micromanaging, is what you were trying to say earlier, where they just want to look at what you're doing, make sure you're doing it the way that they want to do, and managing you to make sure, okay, even the conveyor belt system in the wrong environment is how much are you doing, how much are you producing, because I need to know. That really is about power and control. And it really has to do with social psychology. And I know that you had been saying that, it was a loaded question that you had asked, and that's why I didn't forget it. And you said, why are workplaces, why are people motivated by destroying other people? Why does that happen? And it is a loaded question because it is such a true question. And only people who are connected with their souls really can ask that question earnestly. Because the people who are doing that, they don't think they're doing that. And there have been studies, social psychology studies, that have shown that when you are amidst other people who are bullying other people, also when you are given power and when you're given a place of power over other people, even the nicest, most wonderful, kind-hearted person can turn. Mm-hmm. And become that. And there was the prison experiment in the 70s that showed that. There's other multiple experiments that have shown that that's just what people do. It's a social psychology phenomenon. And when you come into a workplace and this is the environment that you're in, it's fight or flight. And if you fight and you're with it, then you play the game. You drink the Kool-Aid and you play the game and you fight with them and you turn into something horrible. But for every horrible leader out there, they have families who love them. They have people who will vouch for them. They have friends who say they're great people. So it doesn't mean that that's who they are in general. It's just that's who they've become. That's what the environment has turned them into. And that's why what I do is creating environments physically to help empower people to not become that. It's a hard game. But when you try to create change, there's two ways. It's either you create change from inside, even as a person, right? It's either you create change on the inside and sit and meditate, and that may work for a lot of people, particularly if you're introverted, it works. But for other people, it doesn't work that way. You need to change your environment. Change the paint color of your house, bring in plants, open the windows, have light, bring in more energy, positive energy. If you do that externally and you bring that externally, it does the same thing. And that's what my job is creating that externally so that it can create change from the inside.
Mm. Yeah, definitely the external environment definitely plays a role. Um, so say somebody, you came into a workplace and say, I don't know, the company was bought out and now new management's taking over and they were told that it's a very toxic environment and there was a lot of bullying going on and say that whoever the new leadership team that's taking over this company, let's say they are from Gen Z, right? So they're not about, they want to, they have more of a forward thinking mindset. They, kind of want more of a Google type of environment to foster more cooperation amongst workers, no competitive craziness, going on where people are literally manipulating each other and people kind of have to constantly watch their backs with these covert, sabotaging mind games that people are playing. Which causes exhaustion really. And from what I saw when I was in those environments, it actually affects the quality of production because they're tasked with producing, you're tasked with solving problems, you're tasked with coming up with innovative solutions. How could you possibly, when you're so stressed out and have anxiety over if your coworker gave you the right requirements for the project or not, and she doesn't care because she could easily say, well, you didn't listen properly, right?
That's right. That's right.
Right, the gaslighting involved. So now management, they want to shift it. They don't want this toxic culture anymore. They want this much more playful, happy environment because they do want to produce quality work and be known for that. So what would you do?
The first thing that was exciting to me is that you said it's led by Gen Z. The cool thing about Gen Z is this is the generation that grew up with technology. It's harder to change the minds of people who are my generation, I'm Gen X, or people who are older than me, excuse me. And these are normally the leaders of the big organizations that you have right now. And it's harder to change their minds because they grew up in a social environment that enabled powerful people, that enabled you to be power and dictate that power and control is reinforced and encouraged. Okay. Gen Z is not like that. So Gen Z is already different. Today, I've developed a workplace concept that I call the workplace of you. And this came out of the response of COVID, because what I am encouraging all my clients and all the organizations right now to do is to no longer think of a place or your corporate office as the place that people have to come to. Because it's like you said, how you said that people are motivated differently? Everyone's motivated differently. Some people are motivated by being around other people. Some people are motivated just by doing their own thing or to have candles around them, or, they're motivated because they know they're going to see their children after, whatever it is. The focus of companies should be on you and what empowers you, what motivates you, not the other way around. It's not, okay, you need to be empowered by us. You need to be motivated by us. We're going to give you a space. You work there. It's no longer, that's not the case anymore, especially with the Great Resignation and everything that's going on. Now it's about you. So there should be, the first thing is choice. Employees, workers need to have choice. That's what the workplace of you is all about. It's about choice. You should have the choice to work in whatever environment that motivates you or in which you feel most motivated, whether that's at home, whether that's in the office with other people, whether that's in a coffee shop, whether that's in the library. For those who are doing business travel, it could be at an airport, it could be at a hotel, wherever it is that you feel most motivated, that motivates you, that's where you should choose to work. And the good thing about a Gen Z leadership is that's not new to them. Gen Z are the group of individuals who have social followings and have started their own organizations and companies and followings that are 100% remote, 100%. through these virtual tools. So this isn't new to them. And the creation of a new work environment that enables this kind of what you were saying, work collaboration and getting in, no toxic environments. They are the ones who can lead that because there is no resistance to change. It's seamless. It's a seamless transition into that. And the thing I think that they respond to the most is because they've grown up in this environment where things are digital. They've talked to their grandparents at 2 years old across another country through FaceTime, and that's not a problem for them, right? That's so normal to them. When you create any kind of creativity and productivity and innovation, when you talk about problem solving, when you talk about creating new ideas, when you talk about the number one thing that will stifle it, hands down, every time, is a non-psychologically safe environment. When I don't want to bring up an idea because that person's going to knock me down. They're going to throw me under the bus. They're going to take it as their own idea. They're going to shoot me down anyway. They're going to call it a stupid idea anyway. So why will I try? That's the number one way to knock it down. The cool thing about Gen Z is, and this generation, is that they are the generation of possibilities because they weren't limited to, say, an encyclopedia, a book that tells you what's happening, or a magazine or a thing. They have the world at their fingertips, the world of options. Another example is my generation chooses to root for their favorite sports team based on proximity, because that's our world, right? Based on proximity. It's either the college you went to, the city you grew up in, that's your chosen football team based on that. Gen Z, they choose their favorite sports team based on a country or a place that they've never even visited, but that's the team that they root for. And they wear those jerseys, or they root for that. It could even be a team they've never even seen, or a sport they've never even seen. That's the difference. And that difference is significant. And I talk about this because you mentioned Gen Z as the leaders. Those would be my ideal environments to work with, because it's easier. It's almost like they would need to teach me their language so that I work together with them to create an environment with them. Mm-hmm. It's harder the other way around.
Yeah, I mentioned Gen Z because they're the up and coming generation that are taking over with leadership roles and such. And what happens is with each previous generation, we always kind of change a bit. We see what our parents went through. We see, or we've we had internships or whatever, and we've got a taste of what's going on in the workplace, or we hear things too. And there's always a shift. There's like, for example, like what I've noticed is I'm a millennial, so I've noticed that the millennials' parents, like we were raised in the 80s, 80s and 90s, our parents really, the majority of it anyways, due to the culture, they weren't really I don't know, not so like coddly with their children. I would say like they were just heavily invested in working a lot and such. And so now what I'm seeing with the millennial parents is I'm seeing a lot of coddling. I'm seeing a lot of constantly doing something with your child, like wanting to, play with them a lot. Like, I'm not saying it's wrong or good, but I'm seeing two extremes, so I'm seeing, so we do, so it seems like with every generation,
yes,
they flip it around based on what they've experienced or saw. So,
and what their environment is, what their world is, because it's like what you said. If the people who are Gen Xers in your experience or in your purview have not been as present with their children as the millennials have, it could be because they had to go to work, they had to go into the office, they had to spend their workday in the office, so that became their focus. Whereas perhaps the millennials have better flexibility where they don't have to come to work on Mondays or on Fridays, or, they have email now. And so they can, leave work early and just answer on emails, or, they have a cell phone and they can just, take calls, which the Gen Xers and even the previous generations did not have. And you'll find what's exciting is that every generation that comes is always a reflection of their environment. And that's what's exciting. It is exciting. And you're right. It'll be interesting to see what the Gen Zers do and what their world is going to be like. And then from there on, yeah.
Well, we'll see. It just seems like to me, if we look at, like the 60s and 70s, 80s and 90s, there was always kind of this narcissistic, I would say, culture. And I think what's happened is just recently, I think that we've just there's more awareness around what narcissism is.
Mhm.
And so people are now able to recognize it more than they were before. I think before it was very, I would say, like the 60s, 70s, 80s, even 90s. It was more of the few that knew about it, and maybe more people that would, like, maybe more intellectuals or people in the psychology community. It wasn't so widespread. Like I never really saw content around it as much as I do today. Like it's
Mhm.
and everyone's saying it, so it's really turned into, I mean, it's great. So now it's like first comes awareness in order to like shift,
Correct.
that predominant behavior in our society that looks as if it's being rewarded, and that's why
Correct.
it's thriving.
Well, you know how that is, what is contributing to dissolving that is things like what you do, which is bring awareness to self-love, to self-care, and to mental health. That awareness has never been around before. It's unprecedented how much more people are aware of the importance of mental health and taking care of yourself. And people like you are enabling that space and that environment, and you're vibrating out. And that is what we need. That is exactly what we need. Because again, when you are connected with your purpose and your humanity, that's the time you see what's not right. Because otherwise you wouldn't see it. You take it as normal. Oh, it is what it is. Let's just vibrate in that same frequency. Let's just, social psychology will take over. Okay, I guess it's normal. It's normal. So then you take on those behavioral traits, and the next thing you know, you become a narcissist, because it becomes normal. But what you are doing and the space that you are creating for the world, that's why it's so important, because you're vibrating out something else. You're vibrating out, this is connect with who you are, know who you are, connect with who you are, love who you are. And if you don't know, we'll give you the space, we'll give you the things, we'll give you the tools, we'll give you what you need to help you get there. Then we can start to see the negative around us for what it is. And that's exactly, I think, what you're saying is now we're hearing narcissistic, we're hearing psychopaths, we're hearing workplace bullying, even school bullying. We're here. Wait a minute, wait a minute. It's like all of a sudden we're waking up to it. It had been existing before, but now awareness, as you said, is the first phase. Now change can occur. So you, my friend, are in a great, wonderful space, and the world should be grateful for people like you for starting these vibrations.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, that was really one of the main drivers of starting Happy Being Well, is just, just seeing all of this predominant narcissism in our society, and you kind of like, shake your head a bit. I'm like, well, I could see how people can just morph into one. What is that saying? If you can't beat them, join them.
Yeah, that's
But,
exactly right.
yeah.
Yeah, it happens. It's a product of the environment. It's a product of the environment. It happens, and it happens to the best of us, the
Mhm.
best of us without the intent. And like I said, for every narcissist out there, there are people who love them and adore them and feel that they're the kindest, most loving, wonderful people. Talk to their children, talk to their friends, talk to their spouses, you'd never guess that somebody that good could be that evil to other people in the workplace. I've seen it. I've seen it so many times. It's why I wrote my book on workplace experience. It's why I'm speaking so loudly out there about how work environments that are like that should not exist. We should not have that kind of an environment anymore. We just shouldn't.
Mhm.
So the two of us are vibrating from different places, but we're vibrating the same sound. So let's keep being noisy to make change.
Oh yeah, definitely. You know, from my experience of people that have, full spectrum narcissistic personality disorder, um, because our society is so narcissistic that we all exhibit narcissistic traits, right? We all have some of this to some degree. It's just that there's people that have all of the traits and they're, they have literally narcissistic personality disorder where they act. That's when it becomes dangerous. They become dangerous um, psychologically to other people because these people are predators. Um, but what I'm seeing is the trickle down, the hierarchy effect. So I think that, everyone's goes to work and, they're in these narcissistic environments and they slowly morph into one in order to either survive or thrive in that corporate environment. And I really do think I don't think it shuts off. I think they take it home. And I think that, the kids, maybe they start bullying their kids or start gaslighting their kids. And I don't even think it's a conscious thing that's happening. I think they're doing it, maybe they are conscious of what's happening. I think most people are unconscious as to what's even, what gaslighting is. And yet they're doing it by sheer existence, like because it's being done on them. So they're just like a parrot kind of parroting back that behaviorisms to thrive. But I don't think most people are really aware of really truly what gaslighting is, to even recognize it. But they do end up adopting that style of language. And I think this is where we're seeing the kids becoming bullies, and we've seen it's the acts of violence at schools among kids, shooting and even killing. Like, one time I heard, like knives, stabbing children. I mean, it's just, and I think it's just this acceleration of pressure and the bullying, that the adults are bringing home and they're taking that on their kids. So I really feel like it starts with the workplace. I think that's really the heart because that's where we spend most of our time. And then it trickles over to family life, home life, then the kids at school, it trickles over to literally the culture of our children's school on the playgrounds because the parents are molding their children. So I think it's a really huge issue in our
I
society.
agree. But I do want to add hope to that because as we were talking about earlier with the generations and how the generations change, I do want to add hope to that because the generation of the baby boomers, they were around during the time of the war and the generations before that. If you've been in a time of war, narcissistic, when you're a true narcissists are normally, it's not something you're born with. It's something that develops and it's something that normally happens when something traumatic happens to you because it's a self-preservation thing. That's what narcissistic is. It's a self-preservation. And people who are in the time of the war, especially, develop that. And so you see that a lot in that generation. I'm not saying that all generations don't have that, and that is the only way that you can be narcissistic. That's not true, but that is prevalent when that happens. And as you were saying, every generation changes, and it changes the way they are changing in the way that they're treating their children, coddling their children. Maybe, I don't know, but maybe there were children who have become bullies or who have become narcissistic tendencies at home because their parents weren't around. Their parents were at work. They were not around. And so then they've developed it. Perhaps in the change in generations, they then themselves will now be wanting to be closer to be more present to their children, be closer to them, and to make sure that they don't have the same experience that they had, so that that generation can change. So I do want to leave it with that hope that it's not necessarily a hopeless stream of narcissism, and because it does change, and I've seen it change. So, and again, people like you create the change. People like you, not only in what you do, but in your generation, and how you enable children and the next generation. I mean, if you decide to have children, if that's what you want. But it's because it's not just children, it's the people around you, it's your communities, it's your society. It's like what you said, your work and the people who work for you.
Mhm.
It's how you resonate out from there, and then that trickles out. So hang
Mhm.
in there, hang in there. It's not hopeless, I promise you.
Well, this is exactly one of the main reasons why I created the Happy Being Well, community, and releasing a lot of education around self-love and self-care activities. Because once you can create that for yourself, you're not going to want to constantly, get that from other people all the time. And that is really one of the, drivers to narcissistic behavior is they're constantly seeking out supply from other people. Like they're attention, whether it's attention or love, attention, manipulation, like it's always outside of themselves. They
Mhm,
can't generate it themselves.
mhm.
Um, so that is one of the reasons where it's like we all really do need to know how to bring joy for ourselves, like do it ourselves, bring happiness ourselves, not rely on others,
Yes, yes.
pamper ourselves at home, create a spa day, just feel that relaxation, that love, that joy for yourself. It's like pretty much kind of like dating yourself,
Yeah.
when you think about it, because you're kind of romancing yourself, by lighting
Mhm,
candles around your bath,
mhm,
burning some, incense around you, or using an aromatherapy diffuser, just creating a really great environment for yourself, and taking that time out to self reflect, recharge,
mhm,
reboot. And
mhm.
you're getting to know yourself better because you're taking that time out as well. So, yes, this is why we're doing this podcast. This podcast is really all about self love. And so, yeah, absolutely. I'm not saying it's hopeless, but I do like shining a light on it. So, because there's still a lot of people that are not fully well versed in it. So, they're just in the environment, like you said, just thinking it's normal, and thereby unconsciously, you know, just duplicating it, and they're just not even that they just, yeah, they just kind of just go along with the program type of thing.
Mhm.
So, but yes, I definitely see, hope, of course, because I'm seeing a lot of education awareness around it. And of course, people are learning about self love, and that's really where it starts too. It's kind of like knowing, who the enemy is, what it looks like, how it speaks, how it
Yes.
dresses,
Yep.
so you can recognize it, and then start to learn how to, not be a predator to that enemy anymore, right?
Mhm.
And not take self-love. So,
Yes. Yes. And be connected to your goodness,
mhm,
so you don't
absolutely,
resonate the bad.
absolutely, yeah, yeah. So that is, yeah. So thanks for this conversation,
Likewise.
Lenny,
Likewise. I
today.
love your energy, and I
Yeah.
appreciate what you do, and the world needs more people like you. So keep resonating.
Mhm. So if people want to find out more about you, so you're a consultant and you come in and create positive, more productive workplaces,
Well, what
correct?
I do is I create a workplace experience. So right now, because the pandemic has shaken up the idea and the definition of a workplace, whereas before people always thought a workplace meant the office. And even though I had been saying it's not necessarily the office, it is the place in which you work, now they get that. Now people understand that when I say workplace and a workplace experience, it's empowering you to be productive in wherever it is you're working from. So if you're working in a company, I help companies to make sure that you have what you need in your home to be productive. I mean, people are still working on their sofa or working on the dining room table, which is not sustainably productive. You're going to get backaches. You're going to get, you're going to get hunched over. It's not productive. It's helping you understand where in your home has the best lighting, can help you to be, sustainably productive. And right now we're only talking about home and the office. Eventually people will be working in train stations, on airplanes or on trains, in hotel rooms, or wherever it is that they want to be. And it's enabling you to have what you need to be productive wherever that is, because your workplace environment is so important. It's the same thing with your background, your Zoom background. People have come to think, okay, I can work in my pajamas, and technically you can from the bottom down. But if you start dressing in your pajamas as you're giving a meeting, or hosting a meeting, it's not going to be reflecting a work environment that is empowering for you and for other people, and you will not be respected. And you don't know that because you don't understand the psychology behind it, but that's where I give you help. That's where I help you to do that. So I help organizations transform into this new work from anywhere environment where your corporate office is part of a complete ecosystem rather than the center of work.
Okay, cool. Yeah, definitely. Well, yeah, what you wear is how you feel. So,
Yeah,
it
yes.
really is. And I always never understood work, some corporate cultures or some corporate offices, they really, I don't know, have a really low lax dress style, but it truly influences how you feel. So
Yes,
it's,
yes.
I know there needs to be like a medium. You don't want to be always in a suit, but there is
No,
something to it.
correct.
When you're in a suit, though, you do feel different versus wearing leggings and if you're wearing sweatpants, you know what I mean? Like
Yes.
when you're in a suit, you do feel, I'm going to say, more confident. You feel more a professional. You feel like well put together. It's just there's a psychological element to it. So
Yes.
I do feel it does definitely influences your
And
day.
it reflects something about you too, because now that you're working in Zoom or working remotely, there is now, people do have to understand that before, when you give your first impression or when you are in front of people, it's just what you see on you. But now you have this whole rectangle around you, and that reflects it. So you can't, I'm sorry, but you can't work from the bathroom. You can't work from a closet, and even a bedroom is iffy. So there is now consideration for all of that, but we're just transitioning, and the only purpose for my coaching employees and companies in this transition is to empower them to thrive within this new space. And that's really what it is. And for the worker side, it's helping them to know how to thrive and have an environment that allows them to thrive from anywhere. And from the leadership side, it's most of my coaching is helping them to learn to listen. How do you listen to your employees so that you can enable them to thrive? Because it's not anymore about you and what you want, it's about what they want and what empowers them.
Mhm.
And study after study has shown that when people are happy and they bring the best of themselves to work, companies thrive exponentially and their businesses grow exponentially. So it is a win-win for everybody.
Absolutely. Yeah, definitely. For sure. It's when your brain performs better. Memory is improved when you're happy. Countless studies
Yeah.
have shown when you're depressed or stressed out, your memory is like depleted. You're not thinking properly or clearly. Your energy levels go down. I mean, yeah, it never made sense to me why companies don't have happy workers. But yeah, so anyhow, thank you so much for coming on the show.
Thank you for having me. And for those listeners who want to reach out to me, my website is www.workplaceexperience.net, and experience is spelled with an X. So it's www.workplaceexperience.net.
Okay. And can they find you on Instagram or Facebook?
Yes, you can. It's the same thing. Look for Workplace Experience. X with Workplace Experience. It's one word. Experience is spelled with an X. So Workplace Experience. And I'm on Facebook. I'm on, see, I did have a Twitter account, although I'm not so active on Twitter, but I do have Facebook and Instagram, obviously the website, and look for me on LinkedIn if you want to as well. It's Leni Rivera on LinkedIn.
Okay, great. And I will have a clickable link in the podcast description that will link you to her website and also
Awesome.
her Instagram as well. Okay, guys, have a wonderful, happy day. Sending lots of love, light, and blessings your way. Enjoy your day, guys. Make it a good one.